We all grew up believing that Stonehenge is the world's most ancient observatory, but now it has some serious competition for the title. Nabta Playa was built more than 2,000 miles away in southern Egypt and thousands of years before Stonehenge and even the pyramids of Giza. In 1973, a Bedouin guide stumbled upon a strange group of huge stone formations while crossing the Sahara Desert. He led American archaeologist Fred Wendorf to the site, located about 60 miles from the Nile. Wendorf's friend and colleague claims the team found the stones while stopping for a bathroom break in the desert. Either way, what they found changed history. At first, Wendorf thought the stone structures were just natural formations. But then it hit him. This area was once a lake, meaning no natural rocks should even be there. He kept coming back to the site for decades, and by the early 1990s, his team finally uncovered a circle of stones that seemed to line up with the stars in a way no one could explain. After 7 long years of trying to crack the mystery of the site, Wendorf reached out to an expert in archaeoastronomy. They study how ancient people used the stars. One evening, while the expert sat in the cool desert sand staring at the stones, he realized that they formed a pattern radiating outward from a massive burial mound. One by one, as they dug into the sediment, the buried megaliths started lining up like spokes on a wheel. The team had already used radiocarbon dating to test samples from fire hearths and tamarisk wood roofing found inside the stone circle. Nabta Playa had dozens of standing stones, all a few feet tall. Some of them lined up exactly with the sunrise on special days, and others matched up with bright stars in the sky. Inside the big circle, there were 6 special stones that may have been used for rituals or marking important times of the year. Around them, 29 standing stones might have worked like a simple calendar to help people know when it was time for something important, like the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. When the sun rose in just the right spot, it was a sign that the rainy season was coming. The stone circle once aligned with the brightest stars in the northern sky: Arcturus, Sirius, and Alpha Centauri. Some stones even pointed to the constellation Orion. By tracing Arcturus's movement across the sky, they figured out that it matched perfectly with the circle around 4800 BCE. That means it was the oldest astronomical site ever discovered. And the people of Nabta Playa may have been watching the stars thousands of years before telescopes were even invented. It looks like it had a huge meaning for people living and traveling through the desert. Over 10,000 years ago, the long, cold, and dry ice age that lasted for tens of thousands of years was finally fading away. Northern Africa got massive monsoons and rains that filled up seasonal lakes. So, parts of the desert turned into short-lived oases. For the nomadic people who roamed this harsh land, these summer rains were everything. Their entire way of life revolved around cattle. When archaeologists opened the central tomb at Nabta Playa, they dug up cattle bones and even a massive rock carved into the shape of a cow. The people who built it used the stars to guide them and find hidden watering holes like Nabta Playa, which likely held water for about 4 months a year, starting with the summer monsoons. But there was no North Star back then, so instead they navigated using bright stars and the way the sky seemed to spin in circles above them. When the lakes were full, the standing stones would be partly submerged, and from the western shore, you would see the reflection of the stars on the dark water. Nabta Playa is way less famous than Stonehenge, perhaps because its stones were buried and the famous site in England was open to visitors for thousands of years. Sadly, when Nabta Playa did become famous, some tourists ruined parts of it by moving stones around, which messed up the ancient star alignments. To protect it, the authorities moved everything to a museum where people can see the stones and the carved cow statue without damaging them. The Egyptian observatory isn't the only construction similar to Stonehenge. It has versions that were used for different purposes from Germany and France to the US and the Andes in northern Peru. This last one is actually one of the oldest big structures ever built in this region. The circular plaza is made of 2 giant stone walls arranged in a ring. It was likely used for ceremonies and gatherings. Scientists have carbon dated it to be about 4,750 years old, which means it was built before the Great Pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge. The plaza had 2 entrances and a special layer of clay, soil, gravel, and charcoal underneath. It was carefully planned and built. Archaeologists also found ceramic pieces, quartz crystals, and gemstones at the site, so it was definitely a special place. People visited it for centuries, but at some point it was sealed off, probably because of changing beliefs and traditions. The most recent discovery was the remains of a large timber circle roughly the same age and with parallels to Stonehenge, all the way up in Denmark. This open-air structure was likely part of a special area where prehistoric people from the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age gathered for rituals and ceremonies. The circle was made up of 45 giant wooden posts, forming a huge ring about 100 feet wide. The wood is gone now, but scientists believe tall timbers once stood in the holes and created an impressive wood henge. No one knows exactly what these circles were used for, but archaeologists have found animal bones and food remains at similar sites. So people probably used to gather there for feasts and rituals. In 2024, scientists found 2 ancient stone circles from the Neolithic period in Dartmoor National Park in England. Some archaeologists believe they might form a sacred ark. Many of Dartmoor's stone structures were built in a curved shape on the high ground in the center of the area. A long time ago, Dartmoor was covered in forests, so people may have used the high ground as important markers. One of the newly found circles fits inside this ark, but the other one is outside of it, to the north. This could have been an entrance point into the ark. There's also a raised bank of earth near the stones, which looks similar to other famous Neolithic sites, like the Ring of Brodgar in Scotland and Stonehenge itself. This means the people who built these circles may have visited Stonehenge or been inspired by it. Archaeologists in Oman found ancient stone monuments called tralith, which got the nickname Arabian Stonehenge. They were finished about 2,000 years ago, but no one knows for sure who built them or why. Scientists also found stone hand axes that are incredibly old, between 300,000 and 1.3 million years old, from the time when the first humans left Africa. At another site in central Oman, archaeologists discovered a Neolithic tomb from around 5,000 to 4,600 BCE. There are 2 chambers with the bones of dozens of people inside beneath a giant megalithic structure. Nearby, they also discovered rock carvings that were made by people who lived in the area. And then there is another Stonehenge look-alike, this time in Saudi Arabia, that was used as an apartment complex thousands of years ago. Archaeologists discovered a total of 345 stone circles by looking at aerial photos of a lava field. Each circle is between 13 to 26 feet and has at least one large standing stone in the middle. These structures still have remains of stone walls and doorways. Stone circles like Stonehenge are often linked to ceremonies and rituals, but scientists say that many early houses were actually built in round shapes, and rectangular homes only became common much later in history.
Phew! This summer has been turning up the heat like never before. We feel like roasted marshmallows on a sizzling grill. Yes, the world is getting hotter, but some regions have always fought with high temperatures. It turns out people had some inventions to keep themselves cool in ancient times too. Some of them are still functioning, even 3,000 years later. Let's take a look at how people saved themselves from heat throughout history. So, put an ice cube into your cold drink and get ready to hear how people survived the heat. Speaking of ice cubes, do you know that the Persians made an ice storage system? In the deserts of ancient Persia, people had an out-of-the-box idea about how to prevent their food from turning into a melted mess. These ingenious Persians stumbled upon a physics trick that allowed them to create ice in the middle of the desert. They called these cool structures yakhchals, which basically means ice pits. These ice pits were not your ordinary coolers. They were like secret underground fridges. They looked like dome-shaped mud brick structures on the outside, but inside, it was a whole different world. These ice pits had an evaporation cooler system that worked like magic. At night, when the desert cooled down, Persians made use of the radiative cooling effect. They set up cleverly designed trenches to hold thin layers of water. The water froze, defying the desert heat. Then there were underground square storage areas. The Persians collected the melting ice water from these cool trenches, and during the night, they froze it again, making the most of the desert's natural chill. To add to the cooling effect, they built a wall to shade the storage areas from the hot midday sun. And that's not all. They had this fantastic wind-catching contraption called a badger that caught the breeze and directed it right into the ice pits. Fresh air plus ice. Cool breeze. A winning combo. They even had intricate water channels called qanats to bring water to the ice pits and homes all the way from the nearby mountains. As time passed, these yakhchuls faded into history and modern technology took over. But hey, there's good news too. Some awesome folks in Iran are restoring these ancient coolers. So, if you ever find yourself in the desert, don't forget to pay a visit to these marvelous places and witness the genius of the ancient Persians firsthand. Now, I want to focus more on the wind catchers because they don't just help make ice cubes. They actually function as a cooling system as well. Back in the day, those clever architectural wonders were all the rage in places like Persia, modern-day Iran, Egypt, and the Middle East. Imagine tower-like structures with openings at various levels strategically placed to harness the power of nature's breeze. These openings were like magical portals for the wind. They captured those refreshing gusts and guided them right into people's living spaces. Basically, they were natural air conditioners. The breeze would gracefully flow downward, cooling the ground as it danced through the building. The secret sauce lies in the details. The tower's height, the number of sides, the openings, and the positioning of the interior blades. Everything plays its role in how efficiently the wind towers work out. Thanks to these wind catchers, ancient societies could enjoy comfy indoor temperatures without sweating. Can you imagine living in those times? Feeling the gentle breeze whisking through your home, keeping you feeling fresh and chilled out? The Persians are often credited for inventing these awesome wind catchers. But hey, don't forget about Egypt. There, you can find traces of similar structures dating all the way back to 1300 BCE. Yes, the invention of wind catchers may have occurred in ancient Egypt, but Yazid in Iran is the city with the largest number of wind catchers. People wouldn't have been able to live there without these ancient ACs because there was almost no rain in the area throughout the year. Now, let's look at these perforated double-skinned exteriors. Imagine dressing up a building with a fancy perforated screen. It's like giving its exterior a stylish makeover while keeping things chill inside. This genius technique, firstly, scatters the natural daylight, so no harsh sunbeams to blind you. The screen also offers shade like a pro, giving the building's interior a much-needed break from the blazing sun. Think of it as a natural sun hat for your home. Placing this screen about 4 feet away from the outer walls creates a breezy, dreamy hallway for fresh air circulation. And hey, they add a touch of elegance to the building too. These structures are sometimes called jali. Jaipur, India, for example, has an average daytime temperature of about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So these structures are lifesavers. Jalis come in various forms, crafted from cement, earth, and wood. It's a cultural symbol deeply embedded in Indian architecture. You can find its captivating presence in iconic historical buildings like the majestic Taj Mahal and the Grand Red Fort in Delhi. But hey, it's not just a thing of the past. It's still rocking modern architecture scenes, and its charm has sparked creativity in artists and designers worldwide. It adorns the building's exterior, its cross-section showing a larger opening on the outside and a smaller one on the inside. This is where the Venturi effect steps in to show off its physics prowess. As the air flows through the narrowing passage, it picks up speed, creating a difference in pressure between the inside and outside of the building. Air blowing at a higher speed gets compressed, and when released, it cools down. Mashrabia is a wooden lattice or screen used in the Middle East and North Africa. These decorative wonders are like window blinds, but they do more than just look pretty. They're smart too. They give privacy, shading you from the sun, and let fresh air and light in. Some people also add clay pots filled with water, sand, or damp straw to their designs. As hot air breezes through the holes, it also passes through the pot's porous surface. The moisture inside evaporates, cooling the air. This is a perfect low-cost technique for hot and dry climates. It's eco-friendly, and there's no need for electricity. Now, let's fast forward to today. Designers are getting creative, mixing traditional wisdom with modern tech. At the Al Bahar Towers in Abu Dhabi, they've got it too. Picture over 2,000 hexagonal panels that dance with the sun's movement, providing shade to the building's interior. Water evaporation was another secret weapon for ancient people. Simple, yet super effective. Plus, ancient Egyptians hung wet mats and curtains in doorways. When the air passed through them, it cooled down, providing a relief from the scorching sun. Ancient architects were the masters of maximizing airflow. They knew how to cross-ventilate and let hot air escape while inviting cooler air to the party. Speaking of ancient Rome, bathhouses were the place to be back then. It was like a community hub. People gathered to chat about politics, play sports, and, of course, take a relaxing dip. The frigidarium was the cool spot in Roman baths. After a steamy soak in the caldarium, Romans dashed to this giant pool to chill out. Then in some places, like Cappadocia in Turkey, people went underground to hide from the heat. They carved cozy dwellings in volcanic rock, harnessing the Earth's natural cooling powers. So the lesson here is simple. Architects and designers can create wonders by combining local traditions with smart tech. California's Death Valley boasts the highest officially registered temperature to date, with 134 degrees Fahrenheit in 1913. Meanwhile, Africa's sweltering record stands at 131 degrees Fahrenheit in Kebili, Tunisia, as noted in 1931. In Europe, the highest temperature ever documented reached almost 120 degrees Fahrenheit in Sicily in August 2021. Then, in 2022, the UK had the hottest summer of all time.
I bet you've never heard of the legendary oasis of Zerzura. This ancient city is said to be hidden somewhere deep in the Sahara Desert, and its discovery could mean unimaginable riches and untold secrets. According to an anonymous 15th century Arabic guide, the key to unlocking the city lies in the beak of a bird carved on the city gate. Zerzura might not be as popular as Machu Picchu or the pyramids, but that just makes it more mysterious. Legend has it that Zerzura is built around this big oasis somewhere in the desert west of the Nile. Apparently, it's made out of white stone and has all these luxurious houses and gold decorations. The story goes that a scribe wrote down the account of a traveler who stumbled upon Zerzura while looking for his lost camel. At one point in his journey, the man got caught up in a sandstorm, where he got separated from the rest of his group. The traveler kept wandering in the desert for days, and then, out of nowhere, two men showed up and guided him to the city of Zerzura. The traveler described this city as an oasis filled with little birds and made out of pure white stonework. The city is also said to be guarded by giants. In 1835, an English Egyptologist named John Gardner Wilkinson mentioned the city in one of his books. He spoke to a man from Egypt who found the city by accident after days of wandering through the desert. He mentioned some ruins, unusual stonework, and a large oasis surrounded by palm trees. The man even gave some instructions on how the city could be found, indicating that it might be in the western desert of Egypt. But here's the kicker. Even though a group of explorers went out to find Zerzura, they didn't succeed. At the same time, they did stumble upon a bunch of previously unknown oases. In the early 1900s, numerous expeditions were sent to find the city, including one with a fleet of Ford Model A trucks. But, alas, none were successful. Others say Zerzura did exist at one point, but not anymore. It's possible it was swallowed by the desert. It's believed that back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually green. Scientists even found traces of ancient rivers that flowed through the area 100,000 years ago, creating green corridors across the desert. But Zerzura might have never been real to begin with. Maybe it only existed in the minds of people, a figment of their imagination as they were struggling in the African desert. For thousands of years, people have been obsessed with the hunt for another lost city, Atlantis. But if this place really existed, where on Earth, or under the sea, could it be? According to Plato, Atlantis was an actual place, and it was supposedly located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Strait of Gibraltar. But how did this mythical city become synonymous with a perfect paradise-like society? Well, you can thank Ignatius Donnelly for that. The American writer published a book in 1882 where he outlined 13 hypotheses about the existence of Atlantis. Donnelly truly believed that this lost city was where ancient humans lived in peace and joy for centuries. Donnelly even thought that Atlantis was the original source of many ancient civilizations around the world. And if we just followed Plato's clues, we could totally find Atlantis. Sounds like a treasure hunt, right? What inspired Donnelly to go on this quest in the first place, you might ask? Apparently, an amateur archaeologist discovered the city of Troy, using Homer's The Iliad as a guide. Well, if Troy was real, then why not Atlantis? Back in the day, some people believed that America was the legendary Atlantis. Columbus really stirred up some excitement when he brought back news about the New World to Europe. But the real hunt for Atlantis didn't really start until the 20th and 21st centuries. Some people tried to connect the dots between a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini and the destruction of Minoan settlements. But in 2018, a team of investigators claimed they had nailed it, announcing they had discovered concrete proof that Atlantis had existed. What was their evidence, you ask? A series of mysterious circles in a national park in Spain. But the circles turned out to be nothing more than experimental ponds for studying zooplankton. Let's face it, there's no real evidence that Plato's lost city of Atlantis actually existed. But it doesn't make searching for it any less exciting, does it? The Fountain of Youth isn't a lost city per se, but it is another mythical location that many have claimed to have stumbled upon over the years. Long ago, people were obsessed with the idea of living forever, or at least extending their lives as much as possible. Each culture had its own wild story, like the Greeks talking about a magic fountain that let people live longer, or Alexander the Great finding a river of paradise that could heal the wounded. Japanese legends spoke of hot springs that could make you young again, while the Caribbean locals talked about the restorative powers of the water in one of their own mystical lands. Explorers searched far and wide for these magical waters, but nothing. Probably the most famous of all was the story of the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who thought he'd found it in Florida. Now, Ponce de Leon was quite a character. He sailed with Columbus and became an important figure in the area now known as the Dominican Republic. He found gold in Puerto Rico and even became the island's administrator. But when the ruler of Spain decided to replace him in his duties, he got upset and decided to explore Florida, looking for gold and the elusive Fountain of Youth. He explored the Bahamas, but sadly, he didn't find any gold or magic water. He did, however, make his way to Florida. He explored the coast and even discovered the Gulf Stream. Unfortunately, his last expedition didn't go well, and he was wounded. But the legend of him searching for the Fountain of Youth lived on. Even though historians don't think he was really looking for the Fountain of Youth, thousands of people visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park every year to try the sulfur-smelling water. It's the oldest attraction in Florida, which has been around since the 17th century. Some say the water has unusual properties, but I'll leave that up to you to decide after you visit this place. Norse mythology has its own mysterious land called Thule. It's said to be somewhere between Scandinavia and Iceland, where the sun barely shines and the cold bites hard. The folks there survive on a diet of millet, herbs, fruits, and roots, washed down with a grain and honey brew. As for its exact location, scholars can't seem to agree on it to this day. The legendary ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was said to be the first to stumble upon Thule during his quest for tin mines. He sailed his way up north, passing by Scotland, and after 6 long days of sailing, he reached Thule. The people there, according to Pytheas, were quite primitive, but that's no surprise since they were just simple farmers living off the land. They showed Pytheas where the sun set on the shortest day of the year. They also told him that in winter, the sun never rose at all, and in summer, there was no night. For many years, historians have been debating the true identity of this mythical land of Thule. Some say it's Iceland, while others claim it's Norway. A little bit of progress has been made recently with the help of a team of researchers. If their findings are correct, Thule might be the elusive island of Smola. That's farther south than any of the Norwegian islands that were on the list of contenders. It may be too soon to celebrate, but it does look like Thule has finally been found.
You're flying over the Sahara Desert in a small, light aircraft when you spot something truly weird. It seems to belong to a very different part of the world, the ocean. But what ocean can be huge enough for this monstrous sea star to dwell there? You descend and realize that it's not a sea star. It's a towering dune with a pretty unique shape, and it's not alone. From afar, these magnificent sand structures look a bit like pyramids. They have pointed tops and radiating arms. Called star dunes, they're the most complex and largest desert dunes in the world. They're the tallest of their kind, but that's not the coolest thing about them. Researchers have found similar formations on Mars and even on one of Saturn's moons, Titan. Star dunes aren't super rare, but they're especially widespread in southeastern Morocco near the border with Algeria. That's where you're flying at the moment, and the breathtaking dune you're marveling at is Lela Lalia, probably the most famous of them all, a giant 330 feet tall. Scientists believe that it formed in less than 1,000 years. How about doing some research to find out more about these unusual formations? There, I see a great spot for landing. Star dunes got their name because of their multi-armed shapes. They form in areas where winds change direction throughout the year. But even though you can find them in different places on our planet, there is just one confirmed star dune in the rock record, the collective record of Earth's development reflected in preserved rocks. The star dune in question is in Scotland, and it's ancient, from about 250 million years ago. That's all we know about super old star dunes. Probably because we don't know what to look for to identify one. Another problem: star dunes often form in remote locations, which makes them extremely difficult to study. Imagine reaching the nearest settlement, then somehow traveling who knows how many miles to the dune itself, and then slogging up several hundred feet of shifting sand. I'll pass. But you can go since you've already landed, and the dune is right here in front of you. Currently, you're in a dune field called Erg Shabi. Lucky for you, this area has long become a popular tourist stop. Look, in the distance, there are hotels and even a good road. Scientists who examined Lelalalia before you used ground-penetrating radar to find out more about the sand formation. This equipment can detect the tiniest differences in sand grain sizes and water content under the surface of the dune. That's how you can create a picture of its interior layers. Look out! Phew, it was a close call. See this trench? The researchers dug such trenches to take samples of long-buried sands and then examine them. It's a pretty cool process. The thing is, while buried deep inside, the quartz in the sand accumulates radiation coming from natural sources within our planet. We can compare the grains of quartz to minuscule rechargeable batteries. They can store the energy they get from radiation. When researchers bring them to the laboratory, they can make the grains release that energy, which comes out in the form of light. Scientists can measure the brightness and say when the sand enjoyed sunlight for the last time. Now, when those experts who dug the trenches looked inside Lelalalia, they were shocked. The enormous formation turned out to be very young. For a dune, of course. You'd expect a dune that is several hundred feet tall to be pretty old, like thousands or tens of thousands of years. But that wasn't the case. Well, at least not entirely. The upper part of the dune has turned 900 just recently. But look at the sand near the base of the dune. Yep, right there. Well, it was buried there around 12 or 13,000 years ago, representing ancient dunes in the area. Those good old dunes were active for a couple thousand years, and then something went wrong. Because for a whopping 8,000 years, the sand wasn't accumulating there. A mystery? Scientists might have an explanation. You see, the first part of this quiet period occurred during the time when the climate became warm and wet. Yep, even in the Sahara. It happened about 11,700 years ago. It was the end of the last ice age and the beginning of a new era, the Holocene. And guess what? The Sahara went green. It started blooming like your local botanic garden. Plants started popping up all over the place, stabilizing the sand. If you had visited the Sahara during that period, you wouldn't have recognized this place. But you would have likely come across humans wandering marshy landscapes and hunting for food. Researchers have found pottery fragments and stone tools on one side of Lelalalia. That's true. As sand dunes form and then shift throughout their lives, they swallow and protect ancient remnants of life. Just dig well enough and you might find something that will provide you with a window into the past. It can be ancient fossils, anything from fossilized shells and corals to prehistoric plants. Those can offer precious insights into the history of our planet and the living beings once inhabiting certain regions. Now, it might come as a shock, but in the Sahara Desert, scientists have uncovered well-preserved marine reptiles and fossilized fish within the layers of those ancient sand dunes. They are the remains from the time when the Sahara was covered with a sea millions of years ago. Anyway, it's time to leave that ancient paradise if you want to survive. 4,000 years ago, the wet period came to an end, and the Sahara dried out again. Interestingly, our dune didn't begin building up right away. For some time, sand probably blew through but didn't accumulate. Or the dune could have started growing in a different location. And it's a valid theory since scientists have discovered recently that Lelalalia shifts around 1.6 feet every year. It also accumulates about 6,400 tons of sand every year. Now, if you've been inspired by your dune trip and are now eager to explore more of them, I've got some unpleasant news for you. Unfortunately, although there might be star dunes locked in sandstones around the globe, they're super tricky to detect. The problem is, dunes are huge, but they lack a single distinguishing feature. So you'd really need large exposed beds of rock if you want to get a wide enough view to identify a star dune. On the bright side, there surely are places where it might be possible to do such research, but you should be ready to know that it might be just a set of various features that look like other dunes. But if you combine them, you'll say, it's likely to be a star dune. Comment below if you'd like to go on a trip in search of a star dune. Meanwhile, we'll continue our journey. You decide to have some rest and start climbing down the side of the dune. That's when you begin hearing it. Terrible, haunting sounds. Are there ghosts nearby? Worry not, you're safe. You might have heard of a phenomenon called singing sands. As you walk down some sandy slopes, you disturb the grains of sand. They rub against each other, producing friction that creates those eerie melodies. With each step, the sand beneath your feet comes alive in a ghostly choir of whistles and whispers. The sounds range from low hums to loud, high-pitched wails, as if an otherworldly symphony is echoing through the dunes. But of course, scientists have their own very practical explanation, attributing this phenomenon to the right atmospheric conditions combined with the unique size, shape, and moisture content of the grains. Now you've almost made it all the way to the bottom of the dune, but beware of slip faces. When a sand dune reaches a certain steepness, it develops a slope. That's the very slip face I was talking about. This slope is usually on the leeward side of the dune and sheltered from the prevailing wind. Sand grains start accumulating on the windward side, slowly creeping along the dune's gentle slope. At one point, they reach the top. Gravity takes over and they start sliding down, triggering a cascading effect. It looks like a miniature sand avalanche, and I wouldn't want to end up in its way.
Let's do a thought experiment together, shall we? Now imagine you're climbing the Himalayas. However, you're lost. Where you are seems to be an isolated valley. You used all your food and water source and don't know which way to go. You're so out of energy that you don't even know if you'll be able to get back home. Suddenly, in the distance, you see a sage-looking man walking towards you. However, you can't help but to close your eyes as you are defeated by fatigue. You open your eyes to a totally new place. The sage is sitting right next to you. He says,
"Hello, traveler, and welcome to the land of immortals."
That sounds like the beginning of an Indiana Jones movie, right? But what if I told you that such a place actually is said to exist, according to some legends, beliefs, and ancient texts? Indian Tibetan texts mention a place called Gyangai, also known as Shambala or Shangri-La, depending on different cultures. This legendary city is the home of immortal beings and is a land of spiritual enlightenment. Take one of its names, Shambala, for example. It literally means the source of happiness in the Sanskrit language. So, accordingly, you would expect this celestial kingdom to be surrounded by all things of great beauty and wonder, with gardens and other mighty and majestic structures. The ancient beliefs and myths state that when you enter Gyangai, you will immediately be reminded of the structure of a lotus flower with 8 petals. The place is surrounded by mountains covered with snow. It has beautiful waterfalls, crowning into a pure and divine lake, and its water has extremely strong therapeutic powers. The whole place is illuminated by milky white light at all times, and this is neither due to the sun nor the moon. There are also phosphoric plants that can give desired light on voice commands. 100 types of other delightful flowers keep blooming all year round in its gardens, in addition to countless trees where delicious fruits grow. But one tree is known to be the most special one, and that is the tree of immortality, or the tree of life. Described as a shimmering crystal, it stands at the center of Gyangai and unites the skies, the earth, and the underworld. The fruits of it resemble an abstract form of Sri Yantra, a mystical diagram used in Hinduism, which consists of 9 interlocking triangles. However, nobody is allowed to take these fruits out of Gyangai itself. The only way to do it is if you get permission from the inhabitants of the city. This brings us to the question of who lives in this magical and mystical city. According to the legends, Gyangai is inhabited by a great number of advanced masters, or in other words, sages, who subtly guide the destiny of the world through meditation. They are eternal beings who are not affected by any human desires or sorrows. Their duty is to protect the spiritual teachings of the world and work for the good of humanity, as well as all conscious beings. It's also believed that during a time of great chaos in the world, the 25th ruler of this Gyangai will appear among them to lead the planet to a better future. These sages and eternal beings who live there are somehow also the protectors of Gyanganj. So, if you were thinking of just casually walking into this place with a map in your hands, sorry to inform you, but that's not happening. First of all, no one really knows where exactly Gyanganj is. Some people believe it's in a remote valley in the Himalayas. Some claim it's in a hidden cave. There are also people who think it's on a mountain range, and others suspect it's on a secluded plateau. So, the location of the city is a mystery and seems like it will stay that way, since it is also said that the immortal sages who live in Gyanganj camouflage the valley from humans by creating some kind of an energy field. So, Google Maps can't help you with it either. That's why some even suggest, including the Dalai Lama, that it exists in a different plane of reality altogether. In some of the ancient texts, there are actually a few instructions on how to access Gyanganj. However, the directions are said to be incomprehensible, the way I get sometimes. But let's pretend for a second that you did crack the instructions, and the immortal beings living there were willing to grant you entrance. Unfortunately, you still might not be able to enter this cosmic city, and here's why. It is believed that only enlightened masters or sages who have a certain karmic connection with it will be able to reach there. So, what do the eternal beings of such a magical place do there? Remember, they have all the time in their hands. The ancient texts state that Gyanganj has a center and 16 areas that are all meant for 16 different sciences to be studied. These include solar sciences, universal planetary sciences, sciences related to time, the science of air, the science related to the sun and the moon, the science related to space, the science related to gravitational forces, and so on. What they all have in common is that to be able to learn them, you first need to have a very high understanding of energy. The level of courses that are studied is extremely advanced, and these teachings are still unknown even in these modern times. Each scientific system has different departments, and all these departments have their respective teachers. Since time doesn't work as we understand there, and immortality is possible, most of these teachers are hundreds or even thousands of years old. They can stay in their spiritual bodies, which appear like a mass of bright light, while their physical bodies remain separate. What a school, huh? It almost makes Hogwarts seem boring. And does anybody actually graduate from there? Of course, all these stories and mysteries about Gyanganj have attracted many people from all around the world. Countless attempts to find this land of immortality and spiritual awakening have been made by mountaineers and trekkers, including President Franklin Roosevelt himself. But as you might have guessed, they led to nothing. Still, there were a few people, like renowned spiritual leaders, sages, and adventure seekers, who claimed they had visited it. One of them was Sri Gopinath Kaviraj, a celebrated scholar, who was the first person in modern times to have allegedly found the place. After his supposed visit to Gyanganj, he wrote a book about it and made the place popular in modern culture. Upon reading his book, many other enthusiastic foreign scholars rushed into Tibet to learn more about it, as well as try to find it. Another person who claimed to have been there was a mountaineer who got lost in the Himalayas. According to his story, after getting lost, he was feeling hungry, so he accidentally consumed poisoned mushrooms. Feeling completely disoriented by them, he stumbled upon a mountain with a gap, which was covered by fog. Then he fell inside. After getting back up to his feet, he realized that he was surrounded by people dressed in strange clothes who tended to his wounds. After he was fully healed, they escorted him out of the city. Then there was the spiritual leader, Guru Sai Kaka, who revealed to the world about his not one, but many visits to Gyanganj. As per his narration, he claimed to go there, seeking spiritual and immortal teachings. He stated that a sage escorted him into the city every time he visited the place. In his stories, he also pointed out that the kingdom exists in a higher dimension. One other so-called visitor to Gyanganj was L.P. Farrell, an English officer, who claimed to have experienced the mystical place in 1942. Even if all these stories and descriptions about Gyanganj are able to give us a vivid picture, it can still be hard for many to keep an open mind about its existence. Yet again, It's not hard to admit that even the idea of such a place, where immortality is possible and truly moral beings are working to protect humanity, is comforting, mind-blowing, and fascinating.